Hello, friends. I am Sarah from Dandelion Seeds Positive Parenting, and I'm so incredibly excited today to speak with Dr. William Stixrud and Ned Johnson, who have written wonderful things that all of you need to know about. The latest and greatest is What Do You Say? How to Talk to Kids to Build Motivation, Stress Tolerance, and a Happy Home. Now, many of you who have heard me speak before know that I don't recommend a book unless I like it. Now, there are also some books that I recommend strongly. I've got different tiers of recommendation. This is one that I want the whole entire universe to own. Forget planet Earth. I want the universe to have it. These are two decent human beings who come across as decent human beings who give us specific and actionable tools to help us raise decent, good human beings. And it's all connection based. If you know me, you know that is a key word in my day-to-day parenting stuff. And with incredible gratitude, thank you both for being here and speaking with me today.
I'm completely happy
to be here,
sir. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, as you know, if you've watched these interviews before, friends, I do these interviews fairly informally, and oftentimes I'll pick a quote that really, for me, is the heart of the book. For me, the one that jumps out is a strong connection with a parent is the closest thing to a silver bullet for preventing mental health problems in kids. Yeah, absolutely. If we don't have that, we're lost. We've got nothing. Can you both tell me a little bit about why this is so much of an issue now? Why did you write this book now? And what does it have to do with the connection that is that silver bullet?
So we wrote our first book, The Self-Driven Child, in part because we just saw so many kids who were just completely anxious and stressed and depressed. And you know, the level of mental health problems in young people now, even pre-COVID. But also we saw these kids who were just motivationally disordered, where some kids, a lot of kids were just obsessively driven to the point where it's just unhealthy. And a lot of kids figured they're not very good in school. What's the point of trying? And don't work very hard. And so we focused on autonomy. We focused on the development of a sense of control, which is hugely important for mental health and also for motivation. And so often people said this, what do I say to my kid? I keep trying to get my kid to understand. I've told him a million times. So we decided to write a book about effective communication with kids. And when we thought about what are really the basics here in terms of communicating with kids, we thought, well, we focused on autonomy in the first, but we need to take a step back and focus on connection, because that's really where it starts. And that close attachment that develops between parent and child, or caregiver and child, that's really, arguably, it's a better predictor of how you do in college than your SAT scores or your grades. The strength of your connection with your caregiver at 18 months. And so it's a powerful thing. And so we knew about this research that suggests that really the research suggests that the best thing you can give a kid is a close connection, because it has such a protective effect from a mental health point of view. So we said, let's start there. Let's talk about how do you communicate in a way that facilitates that close connection. And that'll have something brilliant to add here.
Well, yeah, and the flip side of that coin is that it's hard to have effective communication with people if you're not close to them, right? And that's what we started the first chapter about the importance of empathy, that when I feel like people really understand me, I'm so much more primed to hear the words that they offer as advice and care. And if we go back to that motivational piece that Bill talked about, this model of self-determination theory holds that we need competence. What's a model of intrinsic motivation says we need competency, yes. We also need autonomy and relatedness. And one of the things that occurred to us is that because a sense of control is so important to children in developing brains, but it's also important for us as adults, right? That a low sense of control really stresses us out as parents or as caregivers. And what will happen when we start to exert kind of more control, it's at the expense of the kids' control, or they have to sacrifice their own autonomy to maintain their relationship with us, to maintain their connectedness. And that's really a trade-off we don't want kids to have to make. And so if we have a close connection and we communicate effectively, then we as parents don't have to like grab control of the remote control, right? Because if we're effective, if we're effective in our communication, we can do it in a way that continues to support the connection with our children and isn't at the expense of our connection with our children.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. And as you say clearly in your book multiple times, it's hard. It's hard for many of us to take this empathy-based and connection-based approach, particularly if we come from the mindset of, well, I'm the adult, therefore I know better, therefore you should do what I say. How do we unwire ourselves a little bit and frankly listen better within the context of empathy?
I think one step is, how's the other way going? The other way, we're thinking that I know best, I'm going to lay it on you. It just doesn't work very well. And your podcast is about positive parenting, and just studies since the 1960s consistently find that the best way to parent a kid is through this authoritative, where we have authority, we have natural authority as parents, because we're bigger and we're wiser, we have more experience, we have so much to teach and offer our kid. But when we start to get mad, when we start to try to use force, when we teach kids disrespectfully, it undoes that natural authority we have. And so we see our approach, including our idea that we'd like to think parents as consultants to their kids as they get older, more than their manager or their boss or the homework police or whatever it is. And I think that we see that squarely in the tradition of positive parenting, where we certainly have a lot to offer. We offer our help, we offer our advice, but we try to minimize force. We try to offer help rather. We try to say, I got an idea about that. I've been thinking about this. I wonder if this will work for you, as opposed to saying you need to do this or this or this, because then we just get blowback.
And I would add to that the way that we communicate with our kids has a lot to do with the way that our kids are going to communicate with other people, including their peers and adults. And to echo that point of talking respectfully with kids, not at kids, right, is really giving them a model that they can carry into every other corner of their lives. And, Sarah, my kids are 17 and 19. So at this point, absent, consistent income, they're ready to run their own lives. Their brains work as well as mine does, for sure. And it really occurred to me, a friend actually pointed out to me that, Ned, you're going to have a longer relationship with your kids as adults than you will with your kids as kids. And so for all of us, we can start at the earliest possible age with that idea in mind of how are we talking with kids respectfully, so that over time, yes, they take on more adult responsibilities. Yes, we give up a little more, control because our kids become more competent, but we do this in a very measured way that's respectful from the get-go. My son's now 19, is, off to college with fistfuls of his mom's and my wife and my money, and he doesn't have to pick up the phone. He doesn't have to respond to text. He could just, sure, Dad, whatever. But we have these conversations probably once a week, and a lot of times we're watching a show together. He's telling us about this class or that class, and a few months ago he's telling me about this girl and the relationship, and it was just the sweetest thing. And it was so fun to share with him our experience, because I started dating my wife when she was 19, the exact same age that my son is. And he sat back and says, I can't believe the things I tell you guys. And I'm convinced that started with how we talked with him when he was 7 and 12 and 16, all the way on through.
Oh, that just warms my heart. And for what it's worth, this is not related specifically to the book, but Ned, one of the things that I love about you and the way that you communicate in this book, as well as in your other work, is you have clearly so much love for your wife and for your 2 children. Everything you write about them just warms my heart. It is clearly a connection-based relationship, and it is so delightful to read that as an innocent family. I don't know you, until now, but oh my goodness, this is the kind of family that we all want to have. It feels good to read your relationship.
Oh, you're so kind to notice that and to point that out. Yeah, I am a lucky guy. My wife couldn't be more wonderful and has given me you, like all parents, my kids are the greatest kids in the world. So I appreciate that, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. I get misty here in my own interview. It's really, really sweet.
Well, yeah, it's funny. It'll be interesting. I was able to, we were given the opportunity to do the audio for our book, which was really fun. And as my wife pointed out, because these are your words, gosh, wouldn't it be fun for you guys to be able to do that? I ended up doing the audio myself. Bill, because of his family and grandkids who weren't vaccinated, it seemed like the safer thing for me to carry that. And what happened, I don't dwell on it too much, but the first day of very first day of recording, I came out of the studio and was on the call with my wife. We got my son in, and I won't go through the whole story, but it turns out my son had a brain tumor, was diagnosed with a brain tumor literally the next day, and I'm doing the recording. And oh man, telling those stories, it was just, whew, it was hard not to read all. It's hard to read a Kindle with the eyes full of tears, but yeah. Yeah, I'm awfully fond of these people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and with that, I'm going to stick with you for a second. You share a story in the book about Matthew, your son, and a time when he was in high school, I believe, and he was concerned about going to a party because there might be drinking there. So
yeah,
completely, relate to the inner jumping for joy that you must have been doing about, hey, my son is telling me something that a lot of kids don't tell their parents. But I'd like for you, if you don't mind, to share a little bit about how that conversation actually transpired, but also what about the years that led up to it? How did you get to the place where your son could even feel comfortable talking to you that way at all?
well, thank you so much for it. I really, it was a wonderful experience for us as a family. I think it probably starts with a story that's in The Self-Driven Child, where I should point this out. My wife is a school teacher and a really good school teacher, and also executive functions left, right, and center. And our son he's the loveliest boy on the planet. He's very dreamy, ADHD, just ahead in the clouds. And it was maybe 5th grade, 6th grade, and my wife was helping him with, sort of getting through some schoolwork, and something was missing, had not been handed in. I don't recall the details. And my wife, a little bit irked, said, well, why didn't you hand that in? Right? Which, if we're honest, a lot of questions like that are really accusations with a question mark at the end. But anyway, and so he kind of responded with the same energy, because you didn't remind me. And I'm like, oh boy. And I'm making Jen like sort of, like the coach, time out here, people. And I step in there and I'm like, first of all, kiddo, let's not throw mom under the bus. Not a very good idea. And then I sneak over to her. I say, so clearly that has to be my fault. Those are poor manners that don't exist on your side of the family. But honest to gosh, you can kind of understand why he said that, because you sort of always do remind him. And my wife is, she could handle her schedule, my schedule, my son's schedule. You, Sarah, if you need an admin, I mean, just fantastic. But just because she could do things better than he could at that age doesn't mean that she should. So we really made this conscious effort to do just what we talk about in the book, of being consultants. Would you like me to remind you? Would it be helpful if? Let me know if I can help. And he rewarded us with getting 52s on tests because he studied the wrong chapter. But goodness, middle school's the time to make those mistakes, right? And he, and as Bill would say, his parole officer says he's doing great. I'm teasing. He got through college and he got through high school. He's off at a college that he loves, that we couldn't be more proud of, blah, blah, blah. So that was kind of I think the seeds of the story. So that fast forward 5 years, and he's a 10th grader, and he's got this party. He's got the dance, excuse me. And he said, Dad, I got a question about the dance. I said, oh yeah. I said, do you need a ride? No, I'm good. We've got Uber. Okay. He said, but there's a party after the dance. I said, oh, okay, right. What's up? So what do I do if people are drinking there? Now, this is his first party that an adult, a teen party. This is his first party ever. And he doesn't know alcohol. You're not going. I mean, we could have shut the whole thing down before social life even, has a chance to start. But we didn't. We really said, well, tell me more about this. And we talked on and on about, and we kind of did all this role playing, pros and cons of in this situation. What are words to say thank you, but that's not for me. And then it finally stops, and he says, well, and he tells this story, as we talk about in the book, that There was a party where a bunch of kids were drinking, and some teen had gotten herself really, really, really like life-threatening kind of inebriated. The police were called, and basically all the kids scattered like roaches under the light, except for this girl who was really sick and another girl who stayed behind to help her. Now, this teen, who the helper, was thanked with a citation by the police and on a record, and $500 fine. And so the story, as it was told, relayed to my son, was, don't get caught there when bad, even if you're innocent, don't get caught when bad things are happening. And so he's like, well, what do I do? And I kind of felt like there was an opening there. I said, well, to borrow Bill Stixrudism, there's another way to look at that. If you'd like me to share that. Well, yeah, maybe you can make an argument that girl who stayed behind, yeah, she got the citation and she paid $500 to save the life of someone else's kid.
Yeah.
So it was really fun, because it opened the door for us to have real conversations about hard stuff, because I'm not naive. He's off to college and he'll be exposed to all kinds of things. And the idea that we could lay down the law and keep him from anything, well, that's not the way the world works. And what I want, I think all of us as parents want, is when our kids do face those crossroads, yeah, they have our values in their heads, but if they also get stuck, that they're not afraid to reach out for help and say, what should I do here? It was pretty fun. He's a cool kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got goosebumps. I read the story already, but just hearing it, it's incredibly poignant, because we all want to have that relationship with our children. We want them to come to us when things go sideways, because they will, for all of us. So you write a lot in the book about parent as consultant, as you alluded to a couple minutes ago. I would love to hear a little bit more about what that actually means. I know there are a lot of parents who, once again, kind of like I said before, say, well, I know all the things, I am older, wiser, et cetera, which may be true to varying degrees, but parent as consultant is really an interesting spin on it.
So, we say that there's three implications of this idea. And we aren't saying that you got a 2-year-old. I mean, the 2-year-old, you hold their hand across the street whether they want or not. But we're saying as they get older, if what we want is, our goal is for kids to be able to run their own life before we send them off to college or wherever they go. That we want them to have a lot of practice running their own life. And so that means at some point we shift into this role more of somebody who always knows best, because we don't really know who they want to be. This is really their life. And so it's somebody who more of a consultant. And so the three implications are: number one, as I said earlier, we offer help and we offer advice. We don't try to force it. And we were given a lecture in Palo Alto a couple of years ago, and we have just mentioned this idea of offering advice. Don't try to solve kids' problems, and listen respectfully. And we get an email the next morning from this mother who was at the lecture. And she said, when I got home last night, my 7th grade son was in tears. He said, I'm the weakest kid in 7th grade. So ordinarily, I would have talked him out of it. Said, no, that couldn't be right. Or I would have gone into solving the problem for him. And let's call the gym teacher. We'll see what we can do. She just said, that sucks. It sounds really painful. If you want to be strong and you feel like the weakest kid, let me know if there's a way that could help. And she went to bed. And the next morning he came to her with a little plan that he had written out about how he can get stronger. And so this idea is we offer help and offer advice. And many of the parents we work with, they say, I've told him a million times, or I keep trying to tell him, how can I get him to see? How can I convince him? Well, save your breath. So and what do you say? We talk about getting buy-in. We talk about, and we get buy-in in part by saying, I wonder what would happen then. Or I got an idea I'd like to run by you. Want to hear my advice about that? It's tentative. It's not trying to force, because when we force, we get resistance. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that as they get older, we want kids to make their own decisions. And we want to have, and what we say to teenagers is the best message you can give to a teenager, besides I love you, is that I have confidence in your ability to make decisions about your own life and to learn from your mistakes. And I want you to have a ton of experience doing that before you send you off to college. And I will tell you that, I've focused on this for almost 40 years, because I'd see these little kids, these kindergarten, first grade kids who were forced to repeat a grade, and it just stung them and wounded them, traumatized them for years. And so I started saying, let's tell the kid it's going to be your call. And I'd see these 6 and 7-year-old kids, Sarah, thinking all summer about, am I ready to go on to second grade or not? And I don't recommend that 6 and 7-year-olds make all their own decision, but I am saying that if we treat them respectfully and we help them think through the pros and cons, kids and teenagers are capable of making very good decisions. And the third thing is simply that the way you become resilient, and we use the term stress tolerant, being able to have high stress tolerance, being able to function well in stressful situations, is you have practice handling stressful situations, so you develop the confidence that I can do it, I can handle stuff. And so much of kind of helicopter parenting or lawnmower parenting, we try to remove the obstacles, make sure they never struggle, is really counterproductive, because the way you develop the ability to cope is something stressful happens, your prefrontal cortex activates, and when the prefrontal cortex activates, it dampens down the stress response, and you go into coping mode. And that's with so many kids that we see, that something stressful happens and they panic, they freak out, they try to avoid it, rather than just going into coping mode. And that's what we want to encourage. That's why we don't want to rush in to solve problems for kids. We can teach them, we can brainstorm with them, we can support them, but we want them to have that experience. If something stressful happens, they adapt to figure out what to do, and then they learn, I can handle stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the focus on stress tolerance, because we know from brain science that how we view our stress literally affects the outcomes that we have to it. It will either lengthen or shorten our telomeres, basic things within our DNA. And that's a conversation for another day. But stress in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's what you do with it, and giving children the opportunity to have these trial runs with, it doesn't always go perfectly. In fact, let's plan for it not going perfectly, because you own a big part of this and your ultimate success in building a resilient, happy life.
So true. Yeah, because Lisa D'Amour makes that point in her book Under Pressure, that stress is what you'll experience when you're at the limit of your abilities. So when you play against a basketball team and they're all a little bigger and a little more talented, right? Or this math isn't busy work now. These things are really making me make my brain start to spin. I mean, we should experience those, because that's how we grow and develop. And to your point, sir, about brain science and Bill's point as well, it's the experience of those difficult things and saving ourselves, as it were, rather than being saved. And it's so hard as a parent to watch your kids struggle and not want to jump in. There's a wonderful research by a woman named Jessie Borelli out of UC Irvine, who has this really clever, she's an expert on overparenting. And so she has this experiment we talk about in the book, where there's a digital puzzle, and there's a 12 or 13-year-old there, and there's a mom there to kind of offer moral support. The only instruction being, don't tell them how to solve it. And the puzzle looks simple, but by design, it's actually not. And so if the kids think it's going to be easy, and then they realize it's not, and they start to get a little frustrated, and they start to get a little distressed. And as they get distressed, their moms get distressed, because they love their kids and don't want to see them struggle. And both of them have a heart rate monitor on, and it's going up, 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 up. And at some point, every mom, breaks the one cardinal rule and jumps in. Well, so what? Let me move it left. Turn the clock. No, turn it the other way. And as she does, her heart rate monitor, her stress goes down, and her kids goes up. And so it's so hard for us not to want to jump in and save our kids, like we put on the super mom or super dad cape. But the problem is, when we do that, we're reducing our kid to being the damsel in distress. And you don't want that. You want them to be the epic hero or heroines of their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And this ties in really well, I think, to your discussion of consequences. I'm kind of jumping around your book a bit. But oftentimes the consequences, we've got natural consequences, we've got logical consequences, and then of course we've got, parental imposed and or arbitrary consequences. Can you talk a little bit about these as they relate to the kind of outcomes we want for our children?
So, I mean, all kinds of research has shown that punishment is really just, it shouldn't be part of our parenting toolbox. It's just not effective. It harms the relationship. Kids may stop doing what they're doing temporarily, but they'll sneak and do it on the sly. And so we think that certainly natural consequences, if a kid forgets to bring his raincoat and it rains, that he'll probably better remember it the next time. We're big fans of natural consequences, and logical consequences are a little bit more complicated because they often can really feel like punishment to kids. And I think so. We love Jane Nelson's book on positive discipline. It talks about the logical consequences. You want them to be agreed on in advance, and they want to be reasonable. And do you remember the 4 R's, Dad, of
yeah. So what they're revealed, so they're in advance, not made up on the fly, right? They're related, right? How it is that taking a cell phone is sort of appropriate punishment for friggin' anything a child can do is just bonkers, right? So it's revealed, related, respectful, and reasonable, right? So you're not 6 months of never seeing your friends, or you don't get dessert for the next 3 years. Seems a little
Yeah. And we wrote about consequences, Sarah, because so often we'd lecture. And we talk about, we'd emphasize about the self-driven child and talk about this importance of kids having a sense of control. And parents would say, what about consequences? And so we wanted to address that more in this book. And so we're a big fan of natural consequences and logical consequences in this way. Certainly, there's a story in a book, a friend of ours who wrote a good book called The Good News About Bad Behavior, Catherine Lewis, who with her kids, the understanding was that if you don't brush your teeth, I'm not going to fight with you about it, but there's no sweets the next day. And the kids they all kind of agreed. So it was agreed upon. And enforcing it was it could be painful, but it works. And so we're on board for that. We also love the idea of collaborative problem solving. The idea of, and I'm so struck by Ross Greene, who became famous in the field of psychology with a book called The Explosive Child, probably 15, 20 years ago. He works with the most difficult, oppositional, explosive, resistant kids. And he came to the conclusion that the best thing you can say to them is, I'm not going to try to use the force of my will to make you do things. And these kids, the kids who get the most consequences in terms of punishment, seem to learn the least from them. And and he and many and the whole tradition of positive parenting is these family meetings. Let's talk it through. Let's talk. Did this happen? What would be a reasonable way to handle this? So we're big fans of natural consequences and collaborative problem solving, particularly as two really powerful parenting tools within this tradition of positive parenting.
And I would just emphasize that point, Bill, that if we go back to the model of self-determination theory of, to be intrinsically motivated to do these things, not because I'm going to be a risk of reward or punishment, or, but the competency, the relatedness and the autonomy, the collaborative problem solving maintains that connection, that respectful relationship, and gives the kids a voice. So they have autonomy, they have a say in it. It's being done, whatever's outcome is being done with them, not being done to them. And just one final word, it's really helpful for all of us to remind ourselves, my wife's a Latin teacher, so this helps me, that the etymological root of the word discipline is not to punish, it's to teach. And it's but part of the reason we lose our cool when we jump into our cell phone takeaway is, when we take more control, it feels better, right? Because we're doing something, doggone it, right? And it lowers our stress. But it's a little like coming home from a lousy day at work and, kicking the dog and yelling at your children, putting on clothes and coming downstairs. And how is everybody? Because I've gotten rid of the stress that way. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard because our kids can upset us and they can do things that worry us, or can do things we don't like. And it's hard to sometimes to not lose your cool. But goodness knows, we're supposed to be the adults, right? And so if we want our, to model, I can be upset and not lose my cool is a pretty nice way to show to your kids, you can be upset and not lose your cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I happen to start losing my cool, it's perfectly okay for me to model catching myself in the process and going, you know what? I'm flipping out right now and I am going to do a finger pull, or I'm going to do some belly breath. Here's what I'm doing to calm my body down, because we know none of us parents perfectly. And my daughter will tell sometimes my daughter will call me on it and say, Mama, quick, do a finger pull. Oh, right.
I love it.
That's great. And one of our favorite lines in our book, What Do You Say? It's not something we made up. It's Jane Nelson's line. Where did we ever get the crazy idea that in order to help kids do better, we have to first make them feel worse? I think, and so this idea of collaborative problem solving, it starts with empathy. I understand that my sense is you feel this way about this. And my perception is a little different. I see it this way. What if we can figure out a solution that works for both of them? That kind of idea. And it's hard. And if we're pissed about it, as you said, we should finger pull, or we should go for a walk, or we should meditate. We should do something, because we talk about communicating prefrontal cortex to prefrontal cortex, meaning when we're in our right minds, when we aren't highly stressed, we aren't exhausted. There's nothing good comes out of communication when we're really highly stressed. And so much, as we say in the book, so much of our work as parents, it's just on ourselves. It's just on ourselves and being able to developing our own stress tolerance and our own ability to seek to understand first rather than judge. I mean, that's certainly one of the core principles in this book, is to communicate and listen. We asked dozens of teenagers as we were writing the book. We had these little focus groups. And one of the questions we asked them is, who do you feel closest to? And sometimes as a parent, but very often it was an older cousin or an uncle or another kid. And they said that what makes you feel close to these people? And the two things were, they listen without judging, and they don't tell me what to do. And I think that this is really kind of how we want to be thinking about our relationship with our kids. We want to listen respectfully, and certainly we want to teach them what works and what doesn't work. And we, as I said, we believe in that we want them to learn from their experience. But kids don't learn very much from punishment. And as Ned say, if the same consequence, they get the same consequence. Parents all the time say, I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. I've taken everything away. It doesn't work so well. Yeah.
One of my daughter's first complete sentences, she was maybe 2, and her brother, who was 2 years older, was trying to get her to do this, that, whatever it was, and she wasn't having it. And I watched her turn on her, pajama footed foot, turn on her heel, and then throw over her shoulder, not to be, and walks away. We all feel like that from time to time, like, yeah, not to be.
I tested a girl years ago. His first words literally were "no way." She wasn't that much easier by the time when she was 11 when I first met her,
but beautiful boundary setting. That's fantastic. Oh, may they never change. That's beautiful. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, and just as an aside for anybody who's watching this, if you are curious about Catherine Reynolds Lewis, Ross Greene, many of these other good folks that these two men are talking about, I've got those interviews with those authors on my website too. So we are all of one collective positive parenting mind here. So if you're curious about those references, they're also on my website. So with that, you were talking a minute ago about intrinsic motivation. We know that we want kids who are driven to do well because they want to do well. At the same time, we don't want to unwittingly put more pressure on them because we simply expect them to do well. So it's a balance. Can you talk to that a little bit about how we nurture that inner motivation without it turning into a different kind of pressure?
Bill, you want to tell the story of 2 sweatshirts?
Oh, yeah. We we went to a lot of, before COVID, after our book Self-Driven Child came out in 2018, we lectured at a lot of schools around the country. And I think we were in Dallas or Houston. And we went to this independent school, and these kids, it was sweatshirt day, and these kids had sweatshirts, like the 5th and 6th grade middle school kids, from Yale and Princeton and this and that. And we met with the counselors, and they said, God, we're just so worried about this, because these kids get all they think now is about college. These kids are these 5th grade boys are having panic attacks because of the pressure of middle school, all this kind of college level pressure. And we know that being chronically stressed and pressured is just terrible for the developing brain. It's just terrible. So it's completely counterproductive. And I think that the Tale of Two Sweatshirts, we also, our friend Ron Suskind wrote a book years ago called The Hope of the Unseen. And it tells a story about a woman of a disadvantaged kid, and she buys him a Harvard sweatshirt to say, I have confidence in you. And all the research on expectations suggests that parental expectations are very highly related to kids' achievement, but it's not in the form of, I expect you to do this, or I'm going to be disappointed with you, or I'll disapprove of you. It's, I have confidence that you can. And so I think that's that expression, confidence. And from my point of view, what we want to do is to say, I have confidence you can figure out your life. You can figure out a life I don't know what kind of life you want. I have confidence that you can figure out, and I'm going to try to help in every way I can. And I think that, so we talk in the book about the importance of working hard, and the working hard. We want kids to put in good effort, and we want them to get better and better and better and better at something, anything really, because that's so good for the brain. Possible exception of video games, but we want them to play hard. There's so much research that talks about the value of being really engaged in whatever your pastime is. And
if I can put a point on that, Bill, that we want kids to work hard to get better and better and better at anything, but doesn't mean at everything, right? Because in the self-driven child, we mentioned the research of a guy named Reed Larson, who looked at how do adolescents become intrinsically motivated. And he found that it wasn't by dutifully doing their homework. It was through what he described as the passionate pursuit of pastimes. Because we know that by definition, 90% of kids are not going to be top 10% of their high school class. And if they feel that the only way that they can be successful is to be top, it really is a recipe for just a whole lot of suffering. And in many cases, anxiety, depression, all kinds of bad, cheating, all kinds of bad behavior, where we want you to work hard at school because that's part of developing yourself. But if your real passion is in, your friends, in art, in debate, in rock climbing, in small engine repair, whatever, working hard at anything, where you're having to push yourself to take on the challenging activities and make your way through it. It's just so darn good for the developing brain.
Yeah.
We are so struck, Sarah, when we read a report by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that was published in 2017 on the major causes of stress and anxiety in adolescents. And the first 4 were poverty, trauma, discrimination, and excessive pressure to excel. And I think that's what we see so much. And often we talk in the book about minimizing the extent to which we try to use fear to motivate kids, because fear is a very good short-term motivator. But it's a terrible long-term motivator. You can't keep it up. There's a story in the book about a kid. I went to a school meeting on a kid who was in 8th grade at a Catholic school, and the 8th graders are applying out to high school for 9th graders. So they tried, 8th grade is an important year. This kid had learning disabilities and ADHD, and school was really hard for him. And I go to the school meeting, and one of the learning specialists, well, that's a different story. But the adults were working harder than the kid was. And I said, we've got to turn that energy around, because that's not going to motivate him at all. And the principal said, I've had 2 talks with him now about the importance of working harder to turn this around. And I said, my sense is that if it didn't land the first time or the second time, just the more you tell him, the more discouraged he's going to get. It's not like he doesn't want to go to a decent high school. It's not like he's not aware that he did better, but he's probably had the experience of trying many times to do better and just not being able to. It's what's the point? tell them it's just not that big a deal. To really take the pressure off, take the fear, minimize the fear of what we're going to see. This kid will actually start working on himself. And I'm just happy to say these people, wonderful educators, that they trusted me. They trusted this approach. And this kid is, I called his mother a year later, kind of hoping that this turned out okay. And it turned out better than I could have expected. He's doing great.
Wow.
I think about what an interesting recipe for creating stress, the sense of I'm stuck, of if all of the adults in your life are telling you that you have to, but your experience is, but I can't. You're just stuck, right?
Right.
And
right,
when you take away that you have to, say, I bet you can, but you don't have to. How much easier it is for it. Well, maybe I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention how closely correlated this is with everything you read about happiness. We don't want kids who succeed in whatever, outwardly facing form that may take if they feel miserable inside. We want to be having discussions with them about what motivates you, what excites you, where's the fire in your belly? What do you wake up in the middle of the night thinking, I can't wait to do this tomorrow? How do we have this discussion, and how do we help influence our children's happiness for the better?
Such a good point. I mean, certainly, when we've just all been watching all these Olympic athletes struggling with their own mental health and being, courageously open and honest about it. But how much of that was driven by I have to, where it's, you either take the gold or you might as well not even have been there kind of thinking. It's not a great place to be. And to your point about happiness, we have a whole chapter in there about talking with kids about the pursuit of happiness. And we look at the research of positive psychology out of Martin Seligman out of University of Pennsylvania, and the beautiful model of PERMA, right? So positive emotions, ease, engagement, our relationships, and meaning, and A, accomplishment. And so certainly, doing well in school, getting to school that you want to, getting an award, getting a raise, getting a good salary, blah, blah, blah. Those things are all a source of happiness. It's just that, how much are you going to sacrifice? Are you going to sacrifice 4 out of 5 for that one component? Because Bill and I have had a number of mutual clients who are, at least a couple of whom were billionaires. And you sort of sit there and watch this, just like, oh my gosh, because some of these folks, how would you say this? They had everything in the world except for peace and happiness. And so everything had been sacrificed on the altar of accomplishment and achievement. But then you don't have relationships that are meaningful and healthy in that connection. You don't feel a sense of engagement or meaning with, you're just, another $1 million in the bank. That's kind of sad.
I think, people, homeschoolers, just have this huge advantage. I mean, over kids in school. Kids in schools, they infect each other with this crazy thinking that the most important outcome of your whole childhood and adolescence is where you go to college. And I was in Houston lecturing a couple of years ago, and I asked these 9th graders, these high school student leaders, these student government kids, and I asked them, how many of you want to be happy as adults? And they all kind of raised their hand. I said, what do you understand is required to be happy as an adult? And this one kid kind of says, well, we understand if you get into a good enough college, everything is set. And if you look at the mental health problems in most elite colleges, they're just kind of off the charts. You realize that couldn't be, as Ned said, if that were true, the kids at Yale would be the most happy people on the planet, and they're decidedly not. And I think that, so we wrote this chapter about how do we really teach kids and model for kids what really makes people happy, because we want kids to be as successful as they want to be, but we want them to be able to enjoy their success. And that the challenge is that we know that developing brains, that teenagers are sculpting their adult brains. And we don't want them to be sculpting a workaholic brain that can never feel satisfied unless that feels anxious unless you're working. Or a brain that's just not capable of enjoyment because we're just so anxious and unhappy.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention whatever we feed grows. I mean, when you're talking about
Mhm.
the amygdala growing when you have more stress, and for those of you who don't know the brain science behind it, it's basically this teeny tiny part of our brain that's supposed to be teeny tiny, but the more stress we have, the more this part of our brain grows. And the more this part of our brain grows, the more stress we have. It becomes this vicious cycle. And conversely, when we can lower our stress, we make room literally in our brain for more joy because our neural connections fire in entirely different ways. All of this literally changes our physiology. It is important stuff.
It's a really good point.
Yes. So our formula is we want kids to work hard and play hard and rest hard. And homeschoolers have such an advantage here where they can get enough sleep. They don't have to get up to catch the bus. They don't have to get up 6:20 to catch the bus. And where we can encourage them to work hard at the things that are really important to them, and have that experience of being really focused and goal directed and making all these new synapses as they get better and better and better. And also, play sports or music, or whatever they do, and then get enough sleep. That really the formula for development is to work hard, play hard, and rest hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't wrap up the interview without asking you one final question because it is a chapter in your book, and I think it warrants just at least a brief discussion. Technology. It feels like it's becoming the new dirty word. It's the T word. What do we do with these discussions with our children about technology and balance? You mentioned sleep, you mentioned happiness. It's all tied to the tech. Where do we go with it?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot in there. Obviously, that's why I have a whole chapter about it. For little guys, and we take a line of, the thinking of Peter Gray, that there's just no doggone reason for little people to have these technologies. And then as you move into kind of, middle grade years, the American Academy of Pediatricians just makes the point that the use of technology be a shared experience. Be on your iPad or watch a movie, but do it with mom or dad or do it with friends. The worst thing we want to avoid is having tween girls sitting there in a room by themselves on Instagram, comparing themselves unfavorably, their blooper reel to everyone else's highlight reel. That's just terrible, terrible, terrible. Two other quick things, that when you look at social media, the research now suggests that people can get happiness and improved happiness up to about a half an hour of use, but after that, it goes down the other side. And so we talk about in the book, really, there's a great clinician here in DC who works with technology addiction and just talks about oscillating between high dopamine activities and low dopamine activities. So be on your phone and then walk the dog, be on your phone and help mom make dinner, be on your phone and, go for whatever. So because dopamine and these technologies are stimulatory neurotransmitters, and you make yourself kind of addicted in ways like cocaine. That's not good for your brain. But then the final thing, particularly as we move towards kids getting into the teenage years, is we don't want to think of it as our job as parents to control our kids' use of technology, but rather to help them learn to control their use of technology for themselves. And I'll go back to, my son who's, up in college, with not that much oversight and a whole lot of his effort and our resources on the line. We really made an effort to say, we want you to struggle with these things because I'm not going to college with you. And there's a story in the book about when he was a sophomore, Fortnite rather came through our house like a plague. And it was, it's a brilliantly designed game. It's super fun. It's kind of addictive. And he had a day off of school. And I asked him the night before, I said, so what are you doing? What are you going to do tomorrow? I was like, play Fortnite. I'm like, great. Anything else? I'm not sure. I come home 6 o'clock on a Friday, find my kid in front of the computer, still playing Fortnite in his pajamas. I admit to being a little hot. I had to do the clenching thing. All right. So I'm like, can you please, either win or die? And because I'd like to go out for pizza. And can you put on clothes? Oh, yeah. Easygoing kid. I simmer down. We have a nice dinner. Enjoy the pizza. Enjoy the company. I say nothing more. Saturday, I say nothing more. Sunday, I say nothing until 5 o'clock when it hits him, if you don't have an adolescent boy, that's when it occurs to them that actually tomorrow's Monday and I do have work to do. And now he's all upset with himself for what he didn't do. And if ever there were chance for like, I told you so, you should have, and whatever, but there's this book, so that's not how I'm supposed to do it. And so I just thought, gosh, I know how frustrating that is. I did that a lot when I was your age. Can I ask you a question? And sort of series of questions, how much time did you spend on playing Fortnite? Well, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 hours. How much do you think you would have been enough to get your fix in? 4 or 5? In the future, would it be helpful if mom or I helped you try to manage that use of technology so you can both play but not feel like you've wasted the whole day, in your words? Yeah, I think that'd be really good. Now we had a green light to play consultant to it. And so that's, back to the point that Bill made before, we want this to be collaborative. We know a lot of stuff that they don't know, but they know their lives better than we know their lives. And command and control, it just doesn't work very well. And it certainly undermines our relationship in ways that are just too painful. And honest to gosh, even if my kid had spent 4 years of playing video games, which he didn't, and would have been really upsetting to me, if I had spent 4 years beating him up about that and then ruin my relationship with him, he's the loveliest kid on the planet. He can do anything. And so it's hard when your kids are struggling with technology or anything else. But back where you started this conversation, the relationship. Why else do you have kids?
And it's that seeking to first understand. Because some of the parents that we see, the message about technology is get off, put that away, stop that. And it becomes almost impossible to influence them in a positive way. If we for the video games, so let me watch you play, or teach me how to play that. Then you use empathy. So I can really understand that looks, man, it feels pretty good to get better and better at this. And then it's easier about that. I know that you don't want to play too much, and I feel like a terrible parent if I let you play too much. How should we work this out? That kind of, as Ned said, that kind of collaborative approach that's respectful, acknowledging that all of us struggle to manage the use of technology. I mean, so many kids tell us they can't get their parents' full attention. They're constantly looking at their phone when the kids are talking. I mean, so this is something we suggest treating technology as a family issue. The goal is for all of us to be able to regulate our use of technology in a healthy way.
I love every part of that. And I can think of no more poignant and specific example to address happiness, consultancy, intrinsic motivation, consequences. I mean, you covered it all in that perfect real life example. So thank you both so much for, there simply aren't words to express my gratitude for the work that you do, the knowledge and the compassion and the insight that you offer to everyday parents like me. And I just want to thank you for your time today and for all you do for the goodness of humanity.
You're a treasure.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we love the way you think.
Love talking. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.